In this video, you'll learn how to create 3 cards using Tim Holtz's Bird Crazy stamps and some of the Delusion expression stamps. I'm going to show you 3 different background techniques, and at the end of this tutorial, there's also a bonus card that you can make. Our first Bird Crazy card, we're going to need the following materials. You're going to need some scattered straw, cardstock, which is Tim Holtz's Distress Ink cardstock, and it needs to measure 5.5 by 4.25 inches, and you'll score it in the middle and just fold it over in half. Then you're going to need the actual plate that's going to go onto the front of the card, and is the one that we're going to work with the stamped image of the bird. And that is simply a piece of white cardstock, and it measures 4 by 5.25 inches. You're going to need Tim Holtz's Distress Ink in mustard yellow and an ink applicator. You can use a finger dauber, your choice. A water brush. StazOn ink, black. It's got to be StazOn or an archival ink by Ranger. Any ink that is not water-based, because we are going to be putting this on water-based. We're going to be coloring in using Gamsol, and that if this is not a permanent ink, then it's just going to blur the stamped image. And you need your stamps. You need this little guy here, the Bird Crazy one, and you're going to need these sayings, and these come from a set by Delusions, and they're by I forget her name. I think it's Deanne Rivley, and this is her collection called What You Mean. And if you want to look this up to see if, to purchase it, then the call number for it is DYR34551. It's got some really neat little sayings on it, and I'm using the set that says, if you're already walking on thin ice, you may as well dance. And of course, you're going to need some pencil crayons. I'm using the Spectrum Noir, but you can use pretty much any pencil crayons for this, because we're going to be using Gamsol. And I'll explain Gamsol when we come to that stage. So to start off with, let's just clear the deck here. We're going to keep our mustard ink, our ink applicator, and our water brush out, and our card. We're going to move everything else off to the side. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create this background. And the background is made up of nothing more than the mustard seed ink, Distress Ink, and using your water brush. Water brushes, if you don't know what they are basically a paintbrush with a chamber that holds water, and it really works well as a tool for coloring in things that have a water base, like water-based crayons or water-based pencil crayons, or in our case, Distress Ink, because it's water-based. Now, what I like to do is, on my non-stick craft sheet, just tap it down good and get some working ink here. Now, if your pad's really juicy, that's probably all you need to do. But if it needs a little help, give it one little spritz or two of water, and it should bead up on your mat for use. Then you just take your water brush, dip it into that, and just start painting. Now, if you give your water brush a bit of a squeeze, you can get more color out of it. And you're going all over the card. And, you know, it doesn't really matter whether your colors are consistent, because you're getting sort of a gradient effect by doing this. And we're just going all over. And I see I picked up a little something there. Okay, make sure your craft sheet is clean. That looks like a piece of old glue that I picked up. But I took it off. It's not going to bother me. And there's really no rhyme or reason. I'm sort of doing this on the diagonal. But you can do it whatever way you like. You're just covering the whole card. Now, your card may warp a little bit because it's wet, and that's perfectly okay. And once we have all the color wherever we want it, just filling in a few little spots here that I want a little darker. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now, to clean your water brush, it's really easy. Just apply it on a piece of paper or right on your sheet, squeeze a little water through it until it goes clear. There may be some staining to the bristles, but that doesn't matter. And that's all there is to that. Now, let me just clean up a little bit here, because I don't want the sink. You could dip a tag into what's left over of the ink or something like that to create something for future use, like a background, if you don't want to waste it. But I'm going to clean it up for today. Now, you can just let your card sit and it'll air dry in a few minutes, or if you're in a rush, a little impatient like me, blast it with some hot air. You can see as it dries too, it does start to work a little bit. That's okay, it's not going to bother us. Just flip it over to the other side and it'll flatten out as you apply the heat. Little trick there. And it doesn't matter if it warps a little bit because we're going to be gluing it down anyways to our card, so that's going to keep it stable. Okay, I think I'm dry enough. Bend it a little bit, curves out. Okay, then I'm going to go around the outside edge with the same color, mustard seed, and I'm going to use my ink applicator. And as I said, you could use a finger dauber for this, or whatever you have, it doesn't matter. Get it inked up well, and we're just going to go around the edges, sort of give it a border effect, and once it's mounted onto the card itself, it's going to make it pop. And you can put as much or as little on as you so desire. Okay, that'll do. Okay, next thing I want to do is where my stamps is use my StazOn or any permanent non-water-based ink pad and my bird and my sentiment. So now there's a couple of ways I can do this. I want to put my sentiment up here and I want to put my bird down here, and that's fine. I can do that. I'll just eyeball it in. But I'm going to show you an amazing invention that helps with your stamping, especially if you were making a lot of these cards all the same. This is a wonderful invention. It is called a Misti. Misti stands for most incredible stamping tool. No, something. I don't know. I can't remember now what Misti stands for. Got it upside down. But it's an ingenious device. If you go on to mysweetpetuniaswebsite.com, you can order one of these for yourself. We can't get them into the store yet because the lady who has designed them is not offering them at wholesale prices yet for retailers. So you can get one from her. They're not that bad in price. They're about 50 bucks American. But you do have to pay shipping, and the shipping is going to cost you about another $15 to $20 with it. But it is worth it, I think. So basically, it's a stamp pad, and all you do is put down what you're going to stamp on. There's a little spongy pad here, and it comes with some, well, you can get some magnets for it. These are fairly strong magnets, and they just help hold your card down, and that's what I'm going to use here because as you remember, my card warped a little bit. And then I'm just going to take my stamps and line them up where I want them. That's my sentiment right here. And my little bird. I want him down here a little bit more. Okay, that looks good. Now, I just take this part of the Misti, once I've got things positioned, just press it down, and it picks my stamps up. Now, I'm going to ink them on this side. Ink them well. And then just flip it over and press down. And lift up, and I'm stamped. Now the beauty of the Misti also is if you don't think you've got enough ink on, you know how sometimes you press it down and it comes up faint and you try to line it up but you can never get it right again, you get a ghost shadow? Well, you no longer have to worry about that with the Misti. Now I think my bird is pretty good. Well, I'll add a little bit more to him too. But I found it a little bit light up here. So down we go. And that's much better, much darker. So that's how a Misti works, and I really like the Misti. So you just peel off your stamps, clean them up. You've seen my previous videos with me stamping. You know I'm not very good at cleanup. Let's get that out of our way. Okay, so this is going to be the front of our card. And now we want to add our color to it. So any kind of pencil crayons you want to use. I find the more expensive pencil crayons work a little better because they're a little bit creamier. As I said, I'm using Spectrum Noir, which are water-based pencil crayons, but any pencil crayon will work with this because you're going to use this marvelous stuff called Gamsol. And let me just grab my Gamsol here. Just bear with me a moment. And here we go. I've got my Gamsol. This is it right here. This often comes in a kit with a paper stub, and a paper stub looks like this. And it may also come with a little sharpening block, which is basically a sandpaper block that you use to just remove any color and make it into a point. Because these are paper, that's all we're doing is just filing the paper layers off. Okay, Gamsol is basically mineral spirits. What that does is it melts down the wax in the pencil crayon so that you can blend everything very evenly. Very much like using a technique with an alcohol marker like a Spectrum Noir or a Copic, except in this case we're using pencil crayons. So how do we begin? I've picked 3 colors, and I'm going to move from the darkest to the lightest. Now the 3 colors I've picked are these. This is a sort of a red, sort of a dark pink, and a dark yellow. And I'm going to start with the red. And I'm simply going to go up here at the top of his little head, and I'm just going to color. And I'm not too concerned about how even my coloring is, because that's what the Gamsol's for. And because these birds are, you know, crazy, I'm not too concerned about my color choice either. No birds in real life will look these colors, so what the heck, but then no birds in real life look like these birds. So I'm working my way towards the center, and so I'm going to switch now over to my darker pink, and I'm just going to overlap. Oops, guess what? Broke my lead. Time for a pencil sharpen, just a second. This is something I find with these particular pencil crayons. They're kind of soft, so you've got to be careful not to press down too hard because the pencil lead in them will break off, but you just sharpen them. Okay, and I'm going to put a little bit more up here on his belly. And then I'm going to pull out my yellow and just add that. Now I picked a little darker yellow because I used yellow in the background and I want this to stand out. So I used a shade darker. And I'm going to do his beak as well. Really, it's up to you what kind of color combination you want to use. Okay, I've got them all colored in. And all I want to do now is I want to blend those colors. So you take your Gamsol. This has a little foam top. You can see that, it's a little discolored, but that won't bother us. So I just turn it upside down, let some of that fluid run into that top. And then you take your paper stub and you roll it. Now, if you're concerned about there is a little color on there, so I'm just going to get some of this to roll out. I'm just picking it up off the craft sheet, but either way, get it wet, and then start near the edge and just slowly move around in little circles. And I don't know if you can see this, but this is starting to blend the color. It's melting the wax in it. And you just do little circles. Give it enough time to start acting with the pencil crayon. Melt it down as you need more. Just dab it in there. And all those lines that you have from your coloring will disappear. And the edges of your color will start to blend into each other, which gives you your shadowing. Now, I'll admit, I am not a good colorer, but using this method makes things look much more professional. Those of you that have taken Copic classes and use those for your coloring, then you know all about the shading. And you're probably better at it than I am. So when I've done enough, when I finally think I like how it looks, that looks pretty good. Okay, and now I'm ready to mount it onto my card. Now, you could use wet glue for this, you could use a tape runner. I tend to always go to my double-sided tape, which I have down here, and I'm just looking for the thinner tape. Yeah, I'm going to use 1/4 inch. I'm using expressive tape, but any double-sided tape you have will do the trick. Oh, and that's foam tape. That isn't double-sided. Okay, what have I got handy here? Okay, should have had these out before. I could use 1/8 inch. I think I'm just going to go with what I have already out here. This is 1/2 inch. It really doesn't matter what size. Now let's find the edge of my tape. Here we go. Lay it down fairly close to the edge. And I like to go all the way around the perimeter. And then I like to take a bone folder and just varnish the tape to make sure it's stuck down well before I peel off the protective layer. And since I don't have fingernails, I use my little paper piercer to pull up those protective pieces. I find it's much easier to get a hold of them this way. And we're just going to center it onto our card. Oops. Let's make sure we get it where we want it before we stick it down. Okay, here we go. And there we have it. There's our first card done. For our second card, we need our card stock in white, cut 4 by 5 1/4. We need our card background, which is cut from Distress Weathered Wood cardstock. We need 2 ink pads in Distress ink. We need Squeezed Lemonade and Broken China, our ink applicator. We need our Stays On ink or any permanent black ink. We need our Gamsol. We need 3 pencil crayons, and in this case I'm using a dark and a light blue and a yellow. Our Bird Crazy stamp, we're going to use this guy, and our saying. And in this case, our saying says, if at first you don't succeed, give up. A very positive sentiment, I think. And then we have 2 stencils from Tim Holtz. We're going to use the Crackle stencil, and that one, if you want to order it, is number THS039. And we're going to use the Blossom stencil, and that number is THS031. So let's make some room here and get started. Move all of this out of the way. We don't need that for a moment. We do need our white cardstock, and we do need our Crackle stencil to start with. Now in this one, we're going to lay the stencil down and off the card because the whole thing will not fit on the card. So you get this border, and I don't think that looks very nice. So we're just going to lay it here. It's going off the edges, not a problem. And we're going to use the Squeezed Lemonade. And I'm using the Tim Holtz Mini Ink Applicator. I find this one the best when working with stencils, but you could use a makeup sponge or a finger dauber, your choice. And then we're just going to lightly pounce it all over the stencil. The stencil moves, not really a problem. We don't want this too dark because we are going to be putting pencil crayon over the top of it, and then we'll just continue the pattern over here, let it overlap. So there's our first layer. For our second layer, we need the Broken China, and we're going to use our Blossom stencil. Now, just before I lay down the Blossom stencil layer on this, figure out in your mind where you're going to be putting your stamps. So I'm going to have this guy sort of in the middle here, and I'm going to have the saying down here. So really, I don't want to cover the inside portion of this or this very bottom part with this stencil, because that's going to make it kind of dark for coloring over top of when we put these down. So we're just keeping that visual in our mind for now. And we'll lay down the Blossom stencil, and I'm going to do a little bit up in the corner, Broken China, this time Distress ink. And again, just pouncing it. Don't want it too heavy. And I'm going to put a little down here in this corner and let it go off the edge of the page. That's fine. My way up there. And I'm going to put a little bit more in the top corner. And that looks good. And I'm just going to put a teeny bit right down here. And there. We have the stencil all done. So that's our background done. One more thing, we're just going to distress the edges with the Broken China. Again, this just makes it pop out from the card background. Okay, so now that we've got our background done, it's time to stamp our bird. So we're going to use the Misti once again. And I'm just going to lay this down. My pad is shifted a little bit. Just drop that down. There's this little foam pad in here that just gives you a spongy area to stamp on. Put down here in the corner. I'm going to lay my stamps where I want them. It's going to go here. Sentiment's going to go right here. Close this. Okay, now using my stays on, ink up my bird, and ink up my saying. And stamp it. I like to let it sit for a few seconds on the actual material I'm stamping because I like the ink to absorb into the cardstock. Especially in this case when I've got already a couple of layers of color on here. I think it makes a better impression. And there we go. And he's all done. Okay, so let's take the card off here and move this out of our way. And now we're going to take our pencil crayons and our Gamsol and our paper stub, and we're going to color in our bird. Again, the same as I did last time, I'm going to start with my darkest color and work around the outside edges and move in towards the breast part, and the breast part's where I'm going to use the yellow. So I'm starting here. And don't be afraid to color over top of the stamped shadowed pieces as well. That's perfectly all right. And you'll notice I am not really coloring in any defined way here. You can go back and forth, you can do circles, whatever grabs you, it doesn't really matter. I'm just laying down my color here so that I have enough to blend. So darker color, let's go with the lighter blue. And we're going to do his beak in the yellow. Again, I picked a yellow that's a little darker than the yellow distress ink that I used in the background. And just do his breast. And I'm overlapping my colors as I do this too, which is fine because we're going to be blending it all. Okay, so I've got that done. I get out my paper stub. I've already sharpened this a little bit beforehand, so I'm not really too worried about that purple coming off. Make sure I get that right. So get this fairly juicy and just start. Now, depending on the pencil crayons that you're using, and as I said, the more expensive ones I find honestly do work a little better than the cheap ones, but the cheap ones, if that's what you've got, they will work as well. But I find that sometimes it takes a little bit more Gamsol to melt the wax in certain pencil crayons than on others. It also depends on how thick you've put the pencil crayon onto the cardstock. And you just keep going around in your tight little circles until it's blended to your liking. Now you don't want to rub too hard either because this is wet. So you're working on cardstock. So when cardstock gets wet, it can start to pill. So if you rub too hard, you may find you're starting to pill the paper, and that's really not a look you want. Okay, he's looking pretty good to me. I think I'm done with him. Okay. And there. Card number 2 is done. Now, here's something you could do as well. If you would like your saying to stand out a little bit more, and this one's got little boxes around it, I'm just going to take my darker yellow and just lightly fill in the boxes over top of the words, just to make it stand out a little bit more from the background. And again, you can use your Gamsol. And just blend that around a little bit. Now you'll probably pick up some of the background color as well that's in there, and that doesn't bother me. If that bothers you, then don't do it. I just think it makes that stand out just a little bit more. So we've got that done. We just need to mount it. So we'll get out our trusty double-sided tape. Move some things out of the way here. Again, I'm putting it fairly close to the edge and all the way around the perimeter. You can put some down the middle too if you wish. I think it's overkill, but up to you. And let's make sure we varnish it. And take off the protective backing. And center it and lay it down. And there we go. Card number 2 done. For our third card, again, we're going to need a piece of white cardstock. We're going to need our background, and our background is made from distressed ink, Dusty Concord cardstock. 2 inks. We need wild honey and mustard seed, our ink applicators. We need our Stays-On black ink. We need our water brush. We need our stamp, our bird stamp. We're going to use this guy. And our saying, and on this one it says, I don't think I want any more adventures. We need our Gamsol, and we need 2 colors of purple, a dark and a lighter purple, and a yellow pencil crayon for coloring this in. And one extra feature we need a piece of acetate cut the same size as our white cardstock, which is 4 by 5 1/4. Okay, and this is what we're going to use to make this particular background. So let's get started. Let's move some things out of our way once again. And so for this, we'll need our white cardstock piece. Just put that aside for a moment. And we need our acetate. You're also going to want a baby wipe handy. Okay, this part is a little bit messy. Now there's several ways you can do this. We're going to apply our ink directly to this piece of acetate. But because these are water soluble, they're going to bead up on here just like they do on a craft sheet. So we're just going to randomly put our color down, and we don't need a lot of it. And let the colors overlap. I know this is difficult to see on camera. Okay. Now, to get these just to blend around, we're going to do a little thing like finger painting, except with our water brush. And remember, it's got water, so we just get it going, and we're just going to swirl it around randomly, just kind of mixing the 2 colors, and they're going to bead up on us, and that's fine. Make sure you get the edges. Okay, that looks pretty good. Just wipe this off here to get the color out of the brush again. And this is why you want the baby wipe, to wipe up anything you have on here. Baby wipe and a paper towel is probably a very good idea. Make a dry spot. Put down our card. Now, actually, the better way to do this is leave your acetate where it is and take your cardstock and lay it on top of it. Now I cut this a little bigger than the cardstock and just lay it there and just lightly, and let it sit here for a few seconds so it can absorb that ink, and then lift it off. And there we have a background. Now, if that is too light for your liking, not a problem. Let this dry. Can I let it air dry? Let it sit for maybe 5 minutes, or hit it with your heat gun. It only takes a few passes. And then reapply some of your ink. And once again, take your water brush. You could spritz this with water as well if you wanted to. The reason I'm using the water brush is because I'm trying to sort of mix the colors together, but also get sort of like these zigzaggy little blotches and things. Let's clean that off. Okay, that's good. And then lay down your card once again. And just light pressure. Let it have a moment or two to soak into the cardstock. And then peel it away. And there. So we got a little bit more color on it. Now you could continue doing this as many times as you want until you get it as dark as you want, but do remember we are going to be coloring on top of it, so we don't want too dark a background. That will do for me right now, so I'm just going to put that aside to let it dry a bit. And easy cleanup. Just take your baby wipe and a dry paper towel, and you can reuse this over and over again. Now, if you want to get really fancy, I'm using shades of yellow on this, but I could very easily put it, after this is dried, put down another layer of a different color, like a blue, for example, or possibly a red, and using the same technique. Now, those of you that know what a jelly plate is, this is very much like jelly plating. This is your own homemade jelly plate in sort of a way. Okay? All right. So once we got that cleaned up, then let's bring out our Misti. Oh, one thing I forgot. Want to do the edges as well. So I'm going to do the darker of the two yellows. So in this case, I'm going to use the Wild Honey. And just go all the way around the edges. Okay, just going to hold that down now. In this one's case, I'm going to put my bird, let's see, I think I'll put the saying up here in this top corner. And I think I'll put my bird right down here. Looks good. Oops, not so good. Okay, let's line that up again. Just give it more pressure to make it stick. This isn't sticky, by the way. It's just static electricity making it stick. And let's ink it up. There stays on. And you know, I think I'm going to just add a little more ink to the saying. Yeah, that's much better. Okay, let's move this all out of our way. And now we're going to color it all in. So get out my Gamsol. I've got my pencils right here. Let's close up the stays on. Okay, so I'm going to start with the darkest purple. Same method as before. I'm going to use the darker color on the outside and work my way in using the lighter colors in towards the breast part of this bird. And of course you can use any color you like. This is totally up to you in everything that we've done here today. You can use whatever distress inks you like. You can use whatever pencil crayon colors you like. Now apply the lighter purple. Again, don't worry about your colors overlapping because you kind of want your colors to overlap because then that gives us our shading effect. And I'm just going to add the yellow here. Now you notice I never colored in their eyeballs, but you could. Totally up to you. And I'm also going to use the yellow over the writing, again because I want to make this pop out a little bit more from the background, and the background on this particular card is very busy. And I do want my receiver of this card to be able to read what I have written. Okay, and we take our pencil stub. I've already sharpened off some of the color. Get it loaded up with Gamsol, and away we go. Oops, a little messy. Making a real mess here. Everybody get over there. Okay. Okay, my bird's looking pretty good. Let's just do my letters. Okay. Now, wipe up our mess here. Get out our card background. And once again, that's Dusty Concord by Tim Holtz. His Distress cardstock line. I love his colors. Putting our tape all the way around the perimeter. And when we get that done, then we're just going to put it onto the card, and as we've done with the last ones. And here's our third card completed. So now bonus. Here's a fourth card that you can make. Okay, for our bonus card, we're using techniques we've already used before, but we're just adding a little bit of a spin on this. I call this one the mixed message card because on the background I have several different sayings on here. And in this case, in this card, the colors that I used for the background card, that is peeled paint distress cardstock. And the color of distress ink I used on this is pine needles. Now, you can do this method, as you know, with any color that you wish. And what I did with the background here, I just used the very first technique that we used at the very beginning, where I used a water brush and some of the ink placed on the mat and spritzed it with a little water and just went all over it like a wash. You could use any one of the other three methods with this background as well, all up to you. Then I put it onto my Misti and I stamped it. Now, the trick here is that actually I stamped the bird, but if you look on the side, you can see here, move it up a little bit, you can see I've raised the bird up with some pop dots and I fancy cut it out. Problem is, it's got this little tuft of feathers up here and his little feet, and those would be very difficult to cut out. So what I did was I stamped it in StazOn ink first onto the card background. Then I stamped the bird again on a separate piece of white cardstock. I colored him in, then I fussy cutted him out, but I didn't bother worrying about cutting off the feathers at the top of his head or his feet. Then when I laid it down using pop dots, I just lined it up with the stamped image, and so now his body's slightly raised from the feet and the top. It gives it a little bit more dimension, and it avoids the problem of trying to cut those kind of pieces out. I colored him in the same method that we've used on the other three cards and mounted him. So that's just another little trick. When you've got something that has really fine pieces and you don't want to cut them out, then what you can do is just simply stamp it in the background first and then layer the other piece on top. So those are our 4 cards. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial.